Okay, we
We're
are
live.
live. Our question today is to discuss with your group members situations in which you've employed the various sources of power and influence referenced in the textbook. Additionally, work to make ties between those sources of power and the various types of leadership that we have discussed. Does anybody want to start? I'm just going to start a timer. I think right off the bat, for me, one thing that stood out in the powers is the legitimate power. And just as a quick call of what that is, legitimate power resides in the position rather than in the person. I find this interesting because, first of all, legitimate power is not my favorite thing. I think some people end up with titles that precede their level of leadership, right? What we talked about last week. So people get promoted into these different levels and then they abuse that legitimate power. At my job, I just got promoted to VP, and I would hope that that legitimate power would only be used in a sense of responsiveness, right? If I ask you a question, I kind of expect an answer, but I don't expect you to respect me out of the bat, right, because of a name. But legitimate power stood out right away. I think that's kind of followed by rewards power, too. I do have the ability to hand out rewards, and I might be defining that wrong, but that's kind of an intro.
No, yeah, I think like reward power. Sorry, no, yeah, rewarding. I mean, you're recognizing them. You're giving them. Kind of as it talks about, like with the like from chapter 4, the transformational leadership, like that pyramid that we went through.
Yeah.
The belonging, affiliation, and stuff. So that reward power, I think, really ties in with that. Sorry, I'm moving away from the computer for a moment. But I think with the reward, you're recognizing them. You're giving them a different sense of belonging when you have that level. Like if you're in that power level, you're not giving them that feedback of a positive sense, then how are you going to get them to gain trust in you?
Well, I think that comes in your role too. Oh, sorry, squeaky toy. I'm so sorry. Lose my life. Okay. Sorry, Yvonne. I think you had a comment too. I'll let you go first.
Well, the one that stood out for me was the expert power. More so as far as like the knowledge. As far as it's based on the person, not the position, and based on experts that have information or skills.
Yeah.
And when I look at that, I think about my previous job where I had been there for many years, and I gained a lot of knowledge by working my way up in the company in the same department. So I was able to learn the different tasks and processes, and then it allowed me to learn the tasks and processes of the different departments as well. So I gained this knowledge that people would come to me on. They would, ask me questions, especially people that were started new with the company. And there was many of us there that were there for quite a long time. And one of the owners, he called it tribal knowledge.
I love that.
Yeah, exactly, because we were there for so long and knew a lot of the tasks and processes. So with that, I was able to work with my team, work with the other departments, and really just be able to give people guidance on how to do things and give them where to go, give them some direction to go as far as like if they had any questions or whatnot. So that's what stood out for me was the expert knowledge. And I know expert knowledge, it could mean many things as far as what the book says, as far as information as well, people that have information that others don't. But for me, it was more just knowing about tasks and processes throughout the company.
Well, and I think that's a really, really. Oh, sorry, Sheila.
Go for it. Go for it.
I think that's a really good call out. What I would, I guess what I would hope when we're tying into leadership is I would think that expert power, like, because it says for legitimate power, right, position rather than the person. I would hope those two would go hand in hand, right? Mm-hmm. You're climbing because you're building expert power, right? Like you were saying, Yvonne, you started at the bottom, more or less, right? Started at a piece of the company, grew in that element, expanded your knowledge across, and I'm sure you were growing in different tiers of your title and your, rank, for so to speak. And it's interesting I love the way you summed that up, because expert power would be what I would personally strive for in my leadership, right? Because then I've earned it.
Yeah.
It becomes not that hey, your best friend hired you and you're the owner, right? And you better respect that person. But the expert power is earned power. Just kind of like there was also on here was it informational or information power, access to and distribution. I think when you tie those three things together, I think there's a period of time when you're starting with new hires when they say, okay, this person has this title, and that first instinct is probably legitimate power, right? I need to respect my manager, Sheila. I need to respect that level and that name, but then you earn the trust and the work and the expertise of that person through the demonstration of information and expertise. Tying in kind of that leadership aspect, maybe. I don't know, maybe I went around too far, but
I do think the expert power is a big one. Just kind of, again, like, from what Yvonne was saying, like working through the ranks. Same thing for me. Like, I started as a barista and, grew in each role I grew, but I worked my way up to where I'm at now and continue on to grow. But I've gained, respect from people because of my knowledge and how much, having that skill set and learning everything about the company, and I've seen the downside of it on the other aspect where you have, not to say external hires are bad, because it's gone both ways where they've been really great coming in, but sometimes the external hires, they have some knowledge and skill set of like business and leadership in a sense, but they don't have that Starbucks culture, and learn, like what is the latte versus, oh, it's just some drink, or what's our core, like where our heart comes from. And I've seen them, in a sense, fail, or they just got the position because, again, they were friends with a regional director somewhere, and they don't get that respect they from their employees and their partners, that when they come in and they're running their stores, people will go against them because they try to, say, well, I managed this, and I was here, and like throw that power ranking there, but they're not the expert or like that task oriented of what we're truly here for. So
the hands-on. Yeah, and that's another thing too. Is when as I worked my way up and when I became manager, I still continued to want to learn, and I consider myself a working manager because I still learned the tasks and learned what my team was doing. So I was still able to understand what was going on in my department, whereas other managers, you would go to them and they're like, they had no clue what was going on within their department. So besides learning it and hands-on as I was working my way up, I still continued to learn and get involved with my team and learn their tasks and their processes, so I can continue to understand how the department was running and what was going on, and the other departments as well. So,
which I think builds on your referent power, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Admiration, right? I was just double checking some of the couple things, but admiring someone, right? Role model power. I mean, like Sheila, if you walked out into your front part right now, and let's say that normally your pre-closer does the mopping, and you mopped, you've earned my admiration, right?
I'm the queen of the bathroom, so they love me for the bathroom.
Take the garbage out instead of setting my pre-closer, right? Like, I understand that this is something that has to get done. It's not because you're here to get it done, right? There's a team effort in that, and I was actually just pulling up that chart that was showing the benefits and the costs for each, it's on page 143 if you have your book, of each power type, and I was looking, because I was remembering our conversation last week about how much we cared, our group especially cared for the followers, right, and what that meant, and when I'm looking at the benefits of expert power and referent power, it's high follower task satisfaction and performance, right? That goes right back into that leadership that we were discussing last week. And it's kind of funny, we all kind of fall in that same area of understanding how the teacher was saying on the comments. That was awesome.
Yeah.
But I love kind of how those three, I think there's kind of like stepping stones, right? Like the first is, okay, this is my boss. The second is, my boss has earned my trust with that expert power. I know I can go to them. They've taken ownership of this role. And then there's that I want to come to work because I like my boss. Right?
Mhm.
That referent power. I think
Exactly.
that tie just kind of really stood out in this moment with you guys.
And then I think another part of the question was tying into, also talking about the influence, power and influence as well.
Yes. Influence. Good call.
So what stood out for me is kind of tying the power to the influence, and that talking about credibility. And one of the dimensions of credibility is competence. So basically, you have knowledge, you understand what's going on, you understand the task, you understand the processes, so you're able to help others. When they come to you, you have an answer for them or can lead them in the right direction. So you're kind of showing them you have competence. There's credibility there, and tying into the dimension of credibility of competence.
That's interesting, and I drew that connection not as strongly, but that word credibility that you used,
Mm-hmm.
credibility, right, goes right back into those two power spots we kind of landed, expert and referent, right? If you're not credible, you don't become you can become an expert, but it's not demonstrated in the way you were speaking to a little bit, Yvonne, where you've built up the ranks and it's obvious you know what you're doing, right? When you bring in that credibility, to your point, Sheila, did you come in as an external hire? You're credible. You've done a management job. You've done a supervisory job. But have you earned it in the role that you're in? Are you leading it in the role that you're in? So when we're talking about credibility, that's a really, thank you for highlighting that word, Yvonne, because I'm thinking that those types of power don't really come into play without that credibility. And then that goes right into that word influence, that other word we're looking at, where I would appreciate someone's influence a little more if they were credible. But if they're utilizing that legitimate power to be credible, then I'm not going to be influenced. I'm going to be frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Sometimes they get scattered. We're right at about the 12-minute mark, just as a check-in. The other piece is,
Would you say that? Would you guys agree that the expert power and the referent power would be part of the functional and relational leadership approach that we talked about in the last couple of chapters?
yeah, definitely relational.
Trying to tie it into the other leadership approaches that we
No, that's great. Definitely relational. Functional, I'm drawing a blank on.
I was thinking more of the tasks, like just being an expert on the task and the processes. So that would be part of the functional, and then the relational is, okay, you're working with people, you're sharing your knowledge so that they can grow and they can learn and they can succeed in their job. So a tie-in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When on top of that, Yvonne, adaptive. So is that what it's called? Adaptive leadership, where you're modifying how you're leading based on the person. You could do that better with that expert knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Going back to what you guys were saying about the different steps, right? Working your way up. You can relate to that phone rep. You can relate to that barista, right, who was there because you were there.
Yeah.
And then your leadership style adapts, and then you utilize that power with your expert quadrant. God, it's not coming out very easy today.
Well, I think with expert and reference, like powers, like how they tie in together, but it's also like the kind of ironic coincidence in the sense like that those are the relationships that take longer to form with your followers, but yet they're the to me like some of the most important ones. You know, like if you know like how it says high follower task satisfaction. Oh my gosh, I can't talk either. Satisfaction or task performance. You know, so you're trying to develop this team and it's going to take that long time to do, but yet it's some of the most important things, I think, in a sense, because you're sharing your knowledge with people, you want to grow, you want to develop people, so it should take the longest, but yet it's kind of like the downside, I think, to it as well, that does take the longest to form that power.
Well, and I think that comes right into that development of a leader, right? Are you willing to put the time in? But the time goes both ways. Because a lot of the time when we're in that development stage and the different types of leadership, right, you're learning based on the learning you had at the bottom of the food chain, right? And you come up and you've taken the experience here and you've taken the experience here and the experience here and you've thrown it all into the blender and said, what do I like? What do I not like, right? And then you're picking that type of leadership style. Is it adapted? Is it functional? Is it relational? To Yvonne's point, there's those pieces that I think it just makes sense why this question was posed now, because they do all intertwine, right? Then that influence comes right into the leadership and then the power. Our teacher's pretty intelligent. But it's interesting, right? But it's interesting how even with just the three of us, with kind of the way, well, the three of us, and then when Shelby's here as well, obviously, we kind of fall into those same fields. I think that's interesting. Even with the different range of ages and the different range of, that's the 15-minute timer, sorry. But tying back into that type of leadership, I think what makes these conversations interesting, especially with our group, is we kind of fell into the same three. There was no coercive power coming out of the heart.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I also noticed with our submission of the different terms that we chose, coaching,
Coaching,
right? Adaptive leadership, followership came up. These are all falling into kind of the dynamic of this group, which I think I just think that's highly interesting, and especially with this question and the power and the leadership and the qualities of a good leader. We're kind of forming that vision already on day 2 together.
Yeah.
So I think it's just really cool. Sorry. We're about that 16, 17-minute mark. Does anyone have anything else to add? Do we think we kind of tied up the pieces there? Anyone want to pick up some loose ends?
I think so. I think we're good.
I think we hit it. So as a kind of a quick recap, legitimate power kind of falling in a sense of titles, right? But we recognize that in order to really earn that title, we're leading into that expert power, that learning of each kind of region, right, of the company, building up that referent power. We've decided those 2 areas take a while, right?
Yes.
But we've all kind of come to this mutual agreement of that need or that desire for high followership, right? And task satisfaction, and kind of understanding that comes from knowing, learning, doing, right, touching those pieces, those tasks. And in the terms of leadership, Yvonne, you brought up that relational, functional, adaptive came out, all falling into how all these tie together with influence and credibility. Does that kind of piece together where we kind of landed today?
I think so.
Yeah, it does.
All right. Well, let's, I'll click off stop, and then I think that puts us back together.